Hi everyone, and welcome to our next brown bag session. And today we are going to talk about decentralized identity. And this event is hosted by the blockchain professionals community. I'm your host Alik Talipov, and if you're new here, we are kind of a think space of blockchain professionals, of blockchain engineers who are interested in the concept of blockchain, in its concept as a technology, and who also aim to accelerate its early adoption. And we also have many other interesting activities within our community, such as conferences, articles, podcasts, and many other interesting things. And our next big event is the Blockchain Community Day conference, which will take place between June 6th and 9th this year. And this week we are closing our call for speakers. So please be ready to apply, to propose your talks, or to register if you are interested. I will bring the QR code and all the other details at the end of our today's session. And please check out our social media pages and our website to learn more about our other activities and to find the recordings of our previous sessions. And let me now invite our today's guest, Sasha Pitkevich. Just a second. Hi, Sasha. How are you?
Hi, Alec. I'm good, good. Great to be here again and great to present again. Uh,
Yeah, so without further delay, I will bring your presentation right on the stage. I hope everyone can see it now and make it a bit larger. So please, Sasha, the stage is yours. Good luck.
Thank you, Alec. Guys, I'm going to speak over the centralized identity. And that's going to be not very, I would say, deep investigation. I'm going to basically combine all the basics and add the recent development, recent trends, and go through like I'm aiming their understanding after this session. And this presentation is motivated by the fact that the last probably 2 months, I was speaking to more than 10 professionals in the area and the people who are developing wallets, people who are developing oracles, people who are developing connections, or business owners who need to develop that. And in all the cases, the topic of the identity uh, yeah, was touched. And every time in the discussion, I realized that the people are basically inventing a bicycle. And that sounds very strange. I mean, after the 2022, when the final SSI specs were finalized and recommended by V3C, I really hope that the people will stop inventing a bicycle and will stick to the recommendations and to the protocols because well, every time when I was talking to people, they were speaking about SSI, but they every time were trying to invent something which would look like SSI, and and the spec is actually quite complex and quite rich in functionality. And when you started to do that by your own, spending a couple of hours, you definitely will miss something. And that's why I just realized that despite the fact that the topic is almost everywhere, there are a lot of people and a lot of professionals in our area who are not really knowing about the concepts, like the recent concepts of the identities about the self-sovereign identity, and not really know about the standards and where to find information. So I'm sorry to say that I'm not presenting some very recent developments or something. I'm just combining the common knowledge together and trying to rephrase that in, yeah, probably in in a simple words. So just to align and to provide enough information for people who are working in the area. And as usual, if you have questions, please post questions, and at the end, together with Alec, we will cover this. So let's start. Well, first of all, every time when we're speaking about identity, I'm trying to bring a little bit of context here. And uh, I'm looking now at a presentation. I'm not sure that it's a recent version. Sounds like, yeah, but Yeah. First of all, what is identity? Currently, like, I'm asking not very stupid question. I'm asking everybody to think about that, because where I would say a couple of years ago that was kind of clear what the identity is, but now with the massive development of virtual reality, the massive development of wearables, like alternative lives, also a lot of development in the physical world, uh, the term identity actually evolves. And when we're speaking about identity, we always have physical identity. I mean, who you are, you have the passport, you are a human being. And again, there are a lot of discussions in the world, a lot of, I wouldn't say that political, but a lot of social discussions. What is your real identity? Yes. But basically, that's something which you carry with your physical body. Yeah. Which is like the qualities and the object, which is a physical object. There's also digital identity, and here there's there's also very well evolving topics of what is identity, but basically that's the set of the information which identifies you as as a user, as a body, and through the series of the uh, electronic attributes. And that can be biometric data, it can be your digital footprint, it can be phone number, password, passphrase. Think about all the parameters you identify yourself. We're speaking about identity. And currently, like like the emergent type of identity, and that's here where we are not fully defining, like the digital type is evolving, and some new approaches towards identity, some new concepts we are for now putting in an emerging state, thinking about uh, thinking about AI, thinking about robotics, automation, and thinking about identity not only human beings, but also identity of the devices, identity of the virtual creatures, identity of robots. And that's that's the topic which is very interesting, which is very interesting to look, because it touches not only, you know, digital aspects, not only, I would say, computer and programmable aspects, but also a lot of social aspects. Do robots have an identity? Do virtual creatures or do avatars have an identity? Is your avatar has the same identity as you? If you have multiple avatars, how does it work? And we know people who spend years, for example, in a World of Warcraft, building like their players, their avatars, their and basically personalizing them for years, spending money to personalize them. And does that object has an identity? Is it yours or is it somebody else? Those topics are interesting to think, but they all are combined in a process of identification, in a process of understanding what is what and who is who. And basically that's actually touches every single point of our life. That's why topic is very important and very important to tackle that because first of all, identity and your identity is a treasure, and identity can be stolen. And by pretending as you or as someone, the significant damage can be can be caused. And there are identity of the organizations, there are identity of the devices, and in every like usage and every use case of the identity, the uh, the personal data is involved, the money is normally involved, the permissions are also involved and reputations are involved. And yeah, you're probably reading the screen. There are quite some of the examples. And I mean, those are not extensive at all. It's just some examples, and we put three here, basically to give you understanding of like to give you proof that every single day, in every moment of your life, uh, you're crossing the identity topic, and yeah, it can be like when it's not safe and it's not secure, they can damage our lives significantly. It can damage businesses significantly. Uh, so, yeah, I think the importance of what I'm speaking about is justified. And let's look like, despite the fact we are working with the identities for decades, for like, and spending a lot of time basically building the solutions and and trying to tackle this topic on the best possible way, there are still a lot of well-known issues with the current identity mechanisms used. Uh, Actually, I think the initiatives for secure and federal, like not centralized digital identities, they started to developing in Europe, I think about 30 years ago, like what, 20 to 30 years ago. Uh, and like what I remember that the European Commission, they sponsored the initiative, uh, and they were like, they were pilots, they were small and large pilots, and they called Stork and Stork 2.0. They were projects, and then they worked with IDES, with the regulations, and there were some changes in the European regulations towards the identity. Then Germany was introducing the electronic identity cards. They were called NPA, and they were actually promoting the creation of the secure digital identities. And well, gradually, like today, we are going to speak about the decentralized identity management. Yeah, and gradually the topic evolved. I would say that currently decentralized identity is still not a mainstream. It's going there. It's going there quite quickly, but it's we are not there yet. They still like looking today, and I will show you looking today, for example, for the available SSI drivers for the universal resolver. I can see that okay, that's half of them are not working. I will show you and will explain you what it is. But basically, currently the concepts like 2 years ago, I'm regularly presenting on this topic, but 2 years ago when I'm presenting, I was saying that there are drafts of the specification. Today I'm happy. Starting from July, the SSI specs from W3C are, are basically finalized. There are a lot of work, and like 2 years ago, I was saying that majority of the work of like universal majority of the diff work of the universal components of SSI stack, they were under development, under design. But currently, they are already working. But still, there's a lot of room for improvement. But yeah, you are staring now at a slide where I'm speaking about the issues. Let's quickly, like I think you had enough time to read, but let's quickly look at that. Well, we all are facing the attempts of the identity fraud. Majority of the people working for enterprises are regularly feeding the trainings where the best behaviors taught to you how to eliminate the identity theft and identity fraud, and how you should behave in the digital and the physical world. Also, what they basically look into the basic login process, which is existing now, I mean, it's pretty boring. It's still the same, and they're like, well, there's still login and password. In some cases, we have already the passphrase. In most cases, we have OTP now, uh, which also like the realization of that also requires quite some. But I mean, look into the other parts of the technology world, which are rapidly evolving. We're still logging in Oculus using login and password in the majority of the cases. Yeah. Uh, and well, all the decentralized and all the recent developments were about putting identity responsibility, like managing the identity responsibility, shifting that towards the user. Basically, we don't want to store your personal data. We don't want even to see that and to touch that. And okay, that's your identity. Please manage that yourself. And in many cases, it's presented like putting the user, being more in charge. I mean, let's face the truth. In the majority of the cases, that's shifting the responsibility from the companies towards the user. And what attempt here is to make it comfortable, because what historically, like time wise, the identity management was at the business side. And in the last 10 years, we see the major shift towards the user side, where we're seeing self sovereign identity. That's a self sovereign. It's when you manage your identity. From one point of view, that's logical, and it has to be like this. From another point of view, that requires certain maturity from the user. And well, there are issues, like there are also issues not on the user side, but on the business side. There are the identity issues and the constant problems between the organizations who are trying to trust to each other, who needed to trust to each other, and regulatory work. And the work of the regulators is frequently troublesome and basically causes yeah, a lot of money and time. But then I think it's the last slide after we're setting up the context. And I'm going to speak here about the identity lifecycle. Uh, where to set the ID and to work with ID, it's not a one action. That's a process. And basically, in any ID system, the process of establishing a person's identity and then using this identity in a later transactions involves multiple stages. And what it's called identity life cycle. And that's very important to have a good life cycle covering all the stages. And also, uh, that's important, like it builds trust alongside the identity life cycle. It creates trust on various levels in between people, identity providers, uh, public and private parties. And the life cycle is like what, as I already said, it consists of stages. You see that on the screen, and it always starts with the registration. It starts with the person who creates the identity. Then it continues to identification, and like basically the identity is updated with the attributes and credentials over the time. And basically the cycle ends with the identity record retired or invalidated. And that's actually important not to forget about this step. And well, let's see at one level deeper. I wouldn't probably make you bored with a lot of description, because well, there's a lot of meat to speak about the keys and everything. But let's briefly just go one level lower, because we will need later on the terms. Uh, so registration. Sometimes it's called identity proofing. It's when the applicant provides evidence of his or her identity uh, to uh, to the credential issuing authority. Authority can be different, but somebody has to confirm that you are you, or somehow it needs to be confirmed, like your identity needs to be confirmed. Uh, if the person reliably identifies himself or herself, the authority can assert the identity with a certain level of identity assurance. It's also important to understand that the level can be different. For some people, probably like when you're uh, very frequent habit or very common habit is when you are registering on a government website or the government services website, and you basically can register anytime. You're providing the set of the information, but your record getting validated only when you work with your passport to the certain certificate authority, to the certain organization which basically looks to your passport, or passport looks to your face, confirms that you are you, and actually validates your record and provides provides a kind of attestation that your record validation is done, and after that you have the all rights in a tool or like in a service. Then, after registration, there is an issuance process, the step two, uh, and that starts with actually issuance, which process it's process of creating and distributing physical credentials or establishing a digital identity. Uh, the other steps are maintenance, and that's retrieval, update, deletion of certain credentials, and removal of the credentials when it's necessary. But like still, we are on we are building your credentials record. You identified yourself, and then you have the parameters, and those parameters needs to be stored and needs to be managed, and you have the set and the variety of the parameters. You can have many documents clarifying your identity or providing you credentials in various systems uh, for the various actions. uh, then uh, the usage of the identity, and identity can be verified, and that's basically where you are trying to access something and you are trying to get something, and where you're asked, who are you? And you are using the certain parameters of your identity to provide information about yourself or about your rights or about your possessions, about something. And that's, again, remember, we were building your record. We were adding there the variety of the parameters. And while we are using that, actually, the recent developments are, while you're showing your passport to authorities, they normally do not need all information which is available in your passport. In a majority of the cases, like for example, in a shop, they need to know that you are older than 18 years old. You don't need to know where you're registered, if you are married or not, do you have kids or not. This all are extra information. But if you're handing on your passport, they will know. Passport, they will know about this immediately. With the digital identity, uh, what the good approaches to identity is that you are sharing only the credentials which are relevant for the ask. And if it asks if you or not, you're proving that it's you or not. If it's asking if you've graduated from university or has something like has driving license, uh, the only piece of information which needs to be shared is shared. It's a good approach, and basically that's managed during the authentication and verification process, and authorization. Like basically, authorization, authentication is answer that you are you. Authorization is the answer to the question if you have certain rights or if you have a certain access. And then the last step of the life cycle is the management of your identity record. And that's, I've been already saying, like it's revocation, reactivation, retiring, or uh, administrating of your identity record. So it's not existing anymore, it's not valid, or it's not accessible anymore. And well, in management, there's always the part of like the true management. We wouldn't cover this here in this talk, but basically there might be issues, there might be need to reissue the identity, there can be like what different levels of the identity, different level of trust. It might be that at a certain level, the trust is compromised and you need to redo your identity and do certain credentials. But we are at the end of the basic understanding about what we are going to speak today. And let's look to the recent trends. And recent, I mean, will last at least 5 years because well, that's so basic topic that it's from one point of view is constantly evolves. From another point of view, it's so many things which needs to be done to really implement certain new features that it takes time. It takes time, and the damage if the things are not done properly is so huge that that the all new things around identity topic they also need to design properly, developed properly, and also tested properly. But as I already said, there is a significant movement, and that's already like I would say the idea is already sold to the public, to the business everywhere. Specifications are ready. So currently it's like really middle of the implementation phase. Also good for all the vendors, for all the players in the market, because what there's definitely demand for the human-centric, personalized identity services. At the same time, we have a spoiled user. I mean, all the recent developments on the internet and everywhere, like the consumers, like all the consumers, they're spoiled and they're requiring usability. And with identity, those are the important topics. And definitely, all our identities go in mobile. And like I mean, I'm trying to understand how many years ago we were not relying on all these OTPs on the mobile phones, all these fingers, all the even iris scan, and all this stuff on the mobile devices. But currently, mobile devices are very important part of the identity topic of the identity implementation. It's already here and will stay here. Decentralization. I mean, with the rise of the distributed technologies, with the rise of the decentralization concept, currently, like well, identity meant for that. Uh, I mean, every time when we are speaking about blockchain solutions, the identity topics comes into the picture because it's very logical, it's very fruitful to use decentralization there. Self-sovereign. I've been already speaking about this. The desire to shift responsibility towards the user itself. His identity, he's responsible. Uh, Security, I wouldn't say that there is like anything additional or anything trendy about privacy security that's important, same as usual. It's probably currently the motivation, the money behind identity theft appeared to be more and more, and the people started to possess a lot, possess in a digital form. I mean, all the cryptocurrencies, all the digital currencies, all the digital possessions, and there's digital assets, I would say. uh, they all are shifting the value in a digital world. In this case, the digital identity appeared to be damn important. I mean, when you were only reading emails and posting pictures, and when the internet was nothing, just information, well, who needed your digital identity? What damage can it be? What money can it be? Almost nothing. currently there are like a lot. Means that the focus for the security and privacy, well, it remains critical, and it probably grows because, well, you have a lot to lose, both businesses and private users. Uh, Artificial intelligence, robots, they bring the new twist towards the identity. First of all, they need an identity. Second, the ownership of the identity, like for example, in case of the artificial intelligence, that's what is the developing very interesting topic, and that's it's definitely a trend. Like with the rise and uh, with those times where artificial intelligence solutions came to the main like adoption, where like almost like, well, I mean, already my mother is using some bits and pieces, and I already asked about the friends who are very far from the IT topics of how to generate the pictures out of the face and how to create some extra pictures or extra text. So currently we are facing the mass adoption of AI thanks to ChatGPT and all the publicly accessible networks. And the topic of the identity is also very serious there. And yeah, the cheap biometric devices and the wide, I would say, adoption, like what currently is accessible. Also, there are quite some of the algorithms, quite some development in this space. Uh, I'm afraid to say right now that we are facing mass adoption of the biometrics too, but we are close to that. Probably wait another month, another 2 months, or half a year, and we would be there. So, well, that's the another picture of how the human being. Like I'm coming to a self-sovereign identity, so I need to basically pave this way, and basically, yes, indeed, all the recent developments, everything which I mentioned so far, they put the human being in the center of the identity management, of the identity ownership, and it's noticed very well by the whole identity ecosystem. And identity ecosystem is huge. Well, starting from the governments and also non-government organizations and also the private sector. And all of them, they need trust because, yeah, we must be sure that we are dealing with whom we think we are dealing. It's also the interoperability is necessary. Like, I mean, that's very important. No one is going to tolerate now not really interoperable solutions. We all wishing that we use one identity for most of the cases, one identity solution, not one identity data, but one identity solution. And I mean, it's very important for the businesses, and especially when now we're speaking about the rise uh, of the business in between businesses. Basically, when we're speaking about the decentralized solutions, when we're speaking about the distributed solutions, it's always when multiple parties are involved. It's always when the core of the business is in between the established legal entities. To be able to do so, to be able to operate with the users, we need an interoperable identity. We need this identity to basically recognize the user among all the systems. And okay, we're building the functionality, we're building the centralized solutions, but we're also integrating that to all the satellite systems. And having the ability to have like transparent user records or business records or something, having the ability to identify them will simplify our task significantly. And that's what actually motivates a lot. Like there are a lot of money and a lot of need, a lot of scope, I would say, in this topic. And that's why it's very interesting for professionals too. It's not only from a user point of view, it's also from a business point of view. It creates a lot of opportunities to be tackled. And currently, I think I'm already ready to speak about the decentralized identities, and a couple of slides to justify that identity should be decentralized. I mean, that would be like you probably laughing. We're sitting in a blockchain professionals brown bag, and that's obvious that we will speak about the decentralization. It's not that obvious to security people uh, because well, it still needs justification. Still, like later on I will have a slide about the history, which actually demonstrates the development of the identity solutions. It certainly started with the centralized ones. Remember all the bank networks, X509, they all are those are approaches for centralized identity, and they worked for years, well, for decades. But the decentralized identity is more secure. It builds more trust. Very important. That's tamper evident. I mean, that's this famous auditability quality of the decentralized networks, where everybody is witnessing what is happening. So it's impossible to tamper. And that's distributed means better accessible, better reliable, and those are the very top points. That's why I already said when we are speaking about the decentralized solutions, identity topics, it came first at the picture. Yeah, and and yeah, that's a slide for somebody to take out because I mean that's on one slide all the benefits of the decentralized identity for the end user and also for the businesses. For the end user, I mean it's portable, that has more chances to be interoperable. The user experience can be better and is better even right now, much more accurate and much more private for both parties. That tremendously reduces the risk. And for businesses, that's what it's all about, the effectiveness. It's all about the possibility to do the more, to do that so faster, to do that with the higher quality, to do that. And basically, we are saving here on compliance. Uh, we are saving here on a trust and interoperability. Uh, I mean, instead of building thousands of the solutions of, I mean, merged identities, I mean, most of the technology people who were not born yesterday knows the wonderful task of holding per record the multiple identities from multiple systems because, well, we need interoperability. Interoperability means to add another column in a database where you store the identifiers from another business or from another solution, and you have your own identity like in your database, and then you are storing the external ones. And like, yeah, I've seen the solutions where there were like like 10 identifiers for one record because, yeah, we are connected to 10 or even more systems and we need to keep this. So for business, that's kind of significant simplification. And simplification means less reconciliation, no reconciliation. It means compliance. It means uh, less money spent on operations. It means high quality. And yeah, that's a slide which I love because basically, traditionally, historically, what are the good words? Uh, basically, I'm later on going to speak about the self-sovereign identity, but to see the roots, I mean, that's all were uh, predicted by the many years of like decades of the previous experience with the digital identities. As I already said, we started with the centralized identities, which is based on a hierarchy of authorities. And yeah, the best example is X509 certification authorities. And then the solutions moved to the federated identities, where separate communities with several hierarchies cooperate to share trusted digital identities. The federated approach has far evolved to the more user centered form of identity, and that was developed by OpenID or AUF or FIDO. But it was still like dependent on a form of the centralized control over the allocation of the identities. And after that, like the user centric identities, we're having in mind the centricity of the end user, the identity owner, we are moving to the self-sovereign identity topic, which where it allows user to have more control. Like I wouldn't say that absolute, but much more control of its identity. And the basic concept of SSI, it's like it's where you like only identity owner has the identity data. Everyone else can see the proofs, can create the claims, and can process that. But the data stays with the user. We can see attestations. We can see derivations from the information stored on the user side. But information itself is not leaving the user premises, like user controlled devices. Uh, so look into all these patterns. And recently, like, I mean, 2 years ago, I've been speaking about that, and I've been stopping at the self-sovereign identity as the latest and greatest. Currently, you can see I've added the NFT-based identity, and that's well, we can argue how much is separate with the self-sovereign, but the protocols are different. So I'm claiming that it's separate because the protocols are different, and also this one has even more user control there. And we already see, like, I mean, that's very new. That's less than 2 years old, I would say. But we already have implementations. There's like there are multiple solutions actually around NFT-based identity. I'm giving you example of one. One of them, you can go to the Photochromic.io website and register your identity, and then what get your own experience of how it is. You don't need much for that, but it's really new approach of having all you need to identify yourself in your wallet. And previously we were keeping, like, I mean, I probably can show the good example, my wallet where I have my passport, the passports of my kids, driving license, medical insurance certificates, like all the source of the identities. Uh, what NFT-based identity offers us is to have the identity wallet where you have the same, including the loyalty cards and something, but in a digital form. And again, that looks from end user point of view very, very logical. From a business point of view, it also looks very logical. So I do believe that we all will witness in next 2 5 years, really like the development of the like a further development of the standards, because definitely NFT based is self-sovereign. It's just how like when we're speaking about a self-sovereign identity, it's already like a name. It's already speaks about digital identifiers, DIDs, and verifiable claims. And I will speak about that very soon. I mean, in a minute. But NFT is a different protocol. So yeah, moving forth. Where's my button? So let's briefly look to the vendor landscape, like basically to the landscape of implementing of all those concepts. And mainly I'm speaking about the self-sovereign identity. There were multiple of finalizations of the specifications. It was like in March and July 2022. Actually, 2022 was a good year to confirm all those identity standards are mature enough to have the mass implementation. And at the same time, there were a lot of players. I mean, 2 years ago, I would say mainly startups. And I had similar presentations speaking about the startups, speaking about the immaturities, speaking about what they're trying to do. Currently, the big players are already offering the solutions. Microsoft, offers SSI implementation. IBM offers SSI implementation. Almost all the players offer SSI implementations. And the good thing for us, those are the true, those are the implementations which are compliant with the recent spec. Means they by default interoperable. Because when we're speaking about the specification of the self-sovereign identity, when we're speaking about the DID specification, that's the globally unique, which means that okay, you can, like, if you are compliant with the specification, you can issue your, like, if you issue, you can issue your identifiers. And even if you are now not connected, you can be connected later on to the any type of the SSI network, and your DIS would be valid. And if you have a party who is able to work as a validator, those identities would be useful. So it's all is the building one global network of all the types of the identifiers. And the IDs, they do have typization. So every type of the document and the whole specification, it's not only identifiers, that's also verifiable claims. Again, probably that sounds strange, but I will show you later on. So it's not only you can identify objects. You also can put the rights in the same system and could put the possessions in the same system, and they all are interoperable as long as like what they developed according to the specification. And there's also quite some work of the Identity Foundation, Decentralized Identity Foundation, DIF, uh, which allows you uh, cross network operations, which gives you the, like I would say, router for the identification requests and for the claim requests, and which gives you uh, the possibility to register the identities of the various types. So it, like, through their work, and that's already in production. I would say that, well, some functionality still needs to be developed, but it's already in production. It's already accessible, and it's already flexible enough. For example, it has drivers to the majority, I would say, of the big decentralized networks, which means that the interoperability is already like almost there. So we have the market where the main players are already in and already offering the solutions, where startups are mostly focusing on the new, latest, and greatest features like NFT, like Web3 identity, like the identity for avatars, like in game identities, like identities, like all the age things, all the new things. That's where the startup space is. And on a core identity, there are already enough of the main, like, well, traditional, I would say, software vendor players. And also because some startups have started the work about like 5 years ago, they already have grown up to the kind of stable identity networks like Sovereign, like Evernym. So some startups have grown enough. Uh, Key players are already here, and endless amount of the startups who are developing the topic further. Okay. So you've seen the identity life cycle, and I needed this life cycle. I needed explanations, and sorry for the time I consumed for that, to demonstrate you basically the one level deeper the services and how the typical identity process is mapped to the software solution. And I would say, like, well, and we have this black box in the mark, like the majority of the blockchain identity vendors, they are concentrating on so-called identity wallet. They're concentrating on account creation, attestation, storing the data. Remember, data stored at the user side, right? Key management, and those we have hundreds of solutions. And even at the EPAM, we are working on even more solutions in this space, and there's a demand for that, and that's normally related to the better user experience, to the attempt to do the new identity locally. So not immediately to connect and to define your JIT in a global network, but to do like in-house implementation, in-house POC, test that, and probably later on to connect. And I mean, most successful implementations, they connect quite fast. And yeah, infrastructure is existing. And again, thanks for the specifications. The work is like it simplifies the approach tremendously. And here I would probably stop one more time and tell to all the professionals, guys, do not invent a bicycle. Just go to the, like, if you need an identity, if you need any approach of the identity uh, stored at the client side, look to the SSI specification. Most likely, I mean, it will cover 99.9% of the cases anyone need. Also, like, if you don't want to use existing implementations, there are open source implementations, there are commercial implementations. If you don't want to use what the vendors provide to you, uh, you can always develop yourself, but use their standard specification, which will secure like good architecture and will secure interoperability for you in the future. Then we are going a little bit deeper in self-sovereign identity spec, actually, uh, which the whole concept is about three roles: identity holder, uh, user, business, uh, certificate authority, or issuer, basically party which issued the credentials for your identity or can attest your identity. And the parties who are helping to verify, who are processing the verification requests. And okay, that's the decentralized network. We have multiple instances of all the players, but it looks pretty simple. Uh, First, we have the registration where, well, for simplicity, let's say user creates its own identity, registers in a network, and asks to like and his identity is attested. Can be self-attested, but normally it's like again the process where somebody or some party like your bank, your insurance company, uh, government organizations, or something signs your identity record, satisfying that they attested that you are you and possesses this identity. Then yourself can create the characteristics of this identity. You can add uh, certain claims, and basically you are saying, okay, I have a driving license, or I finished the university, I worked 10 years for that company, and by creating that claim, you are signing that with the issuer. If you got if you want to have your identity with the parameters that you studied to finish the university with, even the certain, like, well, achieve a certain degree, you are creating the claim, and the issuing organization signs that. Only them know that you actually finished the university. It would be your university, and you have the verifiable credential in your wallet. And so you're obtaining, and that's the process. Like, yeah, you're obtaining as many credentials as you would like, and they all are verified one because they are attested by the issuer of this type of the documents, by the network of issuers of that type of the documents. And any moment you can be asked to uh, demonstrate certain credentials. And yeah, if you have those credentials which are being attested, you're sharing the attestation, and the validator knows that, and validator can check that it's correct attestation and can grant you what you're trying to access. And so basically, you always operate decentralized identifiers, DEETs, and the attestations are stored in, like, you store the documents in your wallet, and the presence of the attestations and also the evidence of the transactions without actual data actually is stored on a decentralized ledger. And then, and that's a concept. That's a concept, and that's a specification. And well, later on you will have the links. There are enough links in the presentation. You can always read, because well, it's a huge specification. It speaks. Well, there are different types of documents. The driving license structure and the passports and yeah, university like what degree certification, they all are different type of the documents. And digital identifier, it contains the semantic inside, so it contains the type. And so you have the certain ID of the certain type of the document. And boy, there are a lot, like every tiny bit of what could happen with that is basically nicely, more than 10 years there was the work on the specification. I was like nicely thought, and you have all the necessary methods, everything is described. So go to W3C site and look to the D specification. But we currently at a state of the maturity that we are benefiting not only from the presence of the specification, but we are also benefiting from the presence of all, like, of the available implementations. The Centralized Identity Foundation, DIF, have started the work of maturing the identity solutions, SSI solutions, of provisioning to the world, and that's voluntarily work, right? Uh, the interoperability for different networks, for different DITs. So the work, like, I know about three major parts of the work. First of all is universal resolver. And that's basically the part which, looking at the DIT, routes the request to the network which is able to process that. It's basically a router. It's a router of the identity information. And there are more than, like, I think more than 50 drivers now for the different networks. Some of them are test networks. Some, like, there is an Ethereum, there is, like, for example, Ropst. Yeah. And there is driver for Bitcoin, there is driver for the sovereign, for one of the SSI implementations. There are other drivers for other types of networks, where the nodes, where the validators and where the issuers are connected, which means that, well, basically universal resolver just really routes your request to the proper network, very similar to how internet works. Yeah? Another part is registration of the new document types, and that's the registration of the new DIT types and new schemas, and how the registration of the issuers and how to work. This is a universal register, also live, also open source, everything is available. I will share with you all the links, but for us it's important to know that this work is already done for us. We can register our, like, if we are building the company who is, for example, would like to keep the network of water filters, and each filter has its own certificate, and we would like to provide the services to the owners of those filters, we can register the digital identifier of the certain type, register all our devices there, and then basically have the service of validating those identifiers. So we basically bringing another identity type, and we are another credential type, yes, and basically it's becoming operable. And important thing, while we are speaking about a self-sovereign identity, like I do not see the questions right now which you're asking me, but thinking that I'm speaking for the audience, which are professional IT people, they should be questioned where to store the big masses of data. Decentralized networks are not suitable for that. And well, mobile phones and everything, mobile devices are also not ideal to store the big amounts of like scanned documents, pictures, big maps, something would be difficult. So the concept of the identity hubs, which are connected storages, is also being developed by diff. And there are specs, there are a lot of work. I think there are examples, but that's probably the less mature than the previous two. Previous two are actually more simple. But there are, well, what is already a really good spec, really good approach towards storing data on a variety of the connected devices. And well, we were speaking about identifying and about the identity. I was speaking about the deeds so far, but we already touched the topic of the claims, and the claims are all right. I mean, I already said identifier is who are you, or it's that object, it's that business. It's basically pointer to the to something and naming that. That's a label. But every label in our idea in the SSI has characteristics. And those characteristics can be used for different purposes. You can see on a screen now, and that's mainly for business people to understand for what we need the extra data. It's not enough to know who are you. That's important to keep the big array of your characteristics and be able to demonstrate that. And here that's important topic because who are you most likely would not change alongside your life. It's just created, attested, and then you are keeping that till the end of the life. But the qualities, they may exist or maybe withdrawn. Today you are married, tomorrow you are not. And that's well variables like what is it's something which can happen. Uh, Today you are in a possession of something, tomorrow you are not. Today you have no kids, tomorrow you have a child. And all of that is managed under the topic of verifiable credentials. And verifiable credentials, they can be different types. They can be metadata for your credentials, like qualities, like age, something. They can be claims. They can be that you are claiming of the possession of the certain assets. I would say certain qualifications, for example, and they can be also proofs. Uh, and SSI specification, which is accessible, it contains the part about this. It also contains a lot about verifiable claims, and here are the picture how the verifiable claims, like life cycle of the one verifiable credential. Well, basically, in real life, it's much more complex because you have the like sets of the credentials, and in many cases to achieve the access somewhere and to participate in some process, you need multiple credentials and you need the combinations of those. But here the life cycle of one, and yeah, I mean that's just array. So it's just array and you operate multiple ones. And again, you have holders, issuers, and verifiers. It's always like this. It's and you have registry where the claims are stored. Uh, Basically, what as usual, holder claims requests certain credential, and the issuer issues that for the holder when it's possible. Yeah. I mean, and the holder, well, there is a possibility of the transferring of verifiable credentials in between holders, but it needs to be defined like the credentials needs to be like the specific ones. But the holder can also present their credentials, their verified credentials to the verifier. Verifier verifies, and verifier can also check status with the issuer. Remember, if we would operate only lifelong credentials, we would not need this complex structure. If we are issuing documents or issuing qualities like was like issuing credentials for the like which are not changing, we can do the digital signature. We don't need any network for that because we have the signed something, you can demonstrate it always. But the problem is the credentials can be withdrawn, credentials can evolve. So verifiers, they can look at the verified credentials and check it. They can also they can do it randomly. They can do it all the time. So it's really programmable. But they can request issuer about the validity of those credentials. It's very important. Issuer also can actively revoke verifiable credential. And in this case, as a holder, next time connecting to the network, uh, the credential would be deleted from your wallet by the like or invalidated. There are possible like different type of operations by the issuer. So you're connected to the network, and that can happen when you are demonstrating one of your credentials, but another one is invalidated because the time has come, or because the issuer found out that it was the wrongly granted or something else. So it's still about your connection to the network. And as a holder, you can also manage your credentials. You can delete them from a wallet. Then you would not have it. Uh, and I think that's like I wouldn't stop here for the questions because of the type of the talk we have now. We will ask all the questions at the end. But there's like just one slide, and later on there would be just additional information to everything which I speak, and this about NFT based identity. And I already said that's an emerging approach towards the identity. It's even strengthening the user side of managing those credentials. And there are, like, because of the new protocol, uh, it's more simple, it's more efficient, and it also works with the smaller data sets, and the personalization is greater, and the user experience is better. Yeah, so it's even more control which user have on their identity and its attributes. Uh, as I already said, that's a new type. We can see and we will see more startups and more solutions implementing that. I do believe that in the course of like 2 5 years, we will experience a shift there. But please remember, all the identity evolutions, they work very slowly. SSI spent a lot of time being defined, being reviewed, and only now the specifications are basically approved. So, very short overview about identity standards. Uh, there are many. There are many, and that's historical one. And we are now in a lucky situation where the traditional regulators, traditional I would say organizations which are working on this type of the specifications are fully aware that they and fully responsible for that. And later on, I will show you. Uh, Jesus, that's the artifact of the way we are sharing today the presentation, because it has to be the uh, animation here. And what you see, because like diff, I've been speaking about the Decentralized Identity Foundation, they are not only building the three parts which I already presented to you, they are also working on a wallet. And the scope of this wallet and the work packages the guys are working, no, it's not diff. That's European. It's European wallet, and we are currently like, it's not only certification organizations, the world certification organizations, because they work mainly on the technology side, but we also see a lot of developments, and I will show you uh, the government organizations who are working on that. And what you see now on a screen is European Association, and when we will share the presentation, you will see the map and the European countries which are participating, almost all of the countries. I mean, probably some of the exclusions for the smaller countries, but the majority of the countries, they participate in this initiative. And that's the building of the identity wallet. And they are already not on the first POC, or probably on the second POC. They like have a lot of work packages and moving with quite a speed, which gives us certain assurance that we will have the wallet with the digital credentials, or at least to travel across Europe. They're first, like as you can see, the yellow one, like they have like three business use cases, and the most important one is the travel credentials. That's the travel ones, and applications, and then the basic, like, I mean, I don't think that the passports would be digital almost immediately, but the passports in terms of identifying who you are. There is definitely, like, they at the scope of European wallet, but I believe that we will start with the identity for traveling, identity for which you are showing in the airport, which you are showing at the border, and that would be the first use case we'll see. And look into the speed, and look into the work which is being done. I think not more than 2 years, probably faster. And these are organizations who are participating, who are building our landscape of the standards. There are quite some of them, and there are international organizations, there are national organizations, there are I would say technology or open source, or like not geography allocated organizations, and all of them are working on a different portion of the standards, and on a different standards in some case. And I will, like, actually prepared, I'm not going to speak about that a lot, but we've prepared the overview, and that's with the links where you can go to, like, for example, to check all ISO standards related to the identity and to the centralized networks. And that's a recent state. And as you can see, like, about 2 years ago, I've been presenting the topic. And for the blockchain ISO standards, there was none published. There was like 2006 or 2007, where the work has been started, but nothing was published. Currently, we already have 9 standards published. There's a glossary there are a lot of term definitions, there are a lot of useful information, and 7 standards are on its way. There are quite some of the biometric standards were published recently, like the significant number has been published, and they're available. Again, do not invent a bicycle. And for security techniques and access lists, and quite some of the identification cards and identification mechanisms is already standardized, and there are quite some of the good portion of the information available. Uh, Here we linked key identity standards, and here let's link either in a standard itself, either that's on organization when the standard doesn't have the separate page, we normally linking that to the organization to the page where you can locate it, and that's for your daily work. And also National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. And here we do have also the links of the guidelines, enrollments. And I believe on the previous page, we had also the FATF recommendations, because FATF, Financial Action Task Force, the organization which speaks about anti-money laundering, also has opinion and a guidance on the digital identity. It's also quite interesting document, and they are nicely linking all standards together. It's quite easy to read their document and quite easy to understand what do they recommend. Yeah, I'm at the end of my speech. I think I consumed quite some time, but I'm ready to answer the questions. I hope that by the end of this story, you understand the current state of the market. You also understand the concepts and how it works, which is enough for you to make a decision and to go to the particular specification or to search for the particular terms and to find out how to develop something which would be interoperable, which would be uh, well understood by others, which would be in line in where the world now is going. Alec, do we have questions?
Okay, Sasha, thank you so much. And we've got a handful of questions. Just a second, let me check our live chat. So, yes, our good friend Michal Shepanik says, I will ask a question that every Web3 enthusiast is afraid to ask. What is the difference between wallet security and password protection to factor authorization of our access, for example, to Gmail/bank?
I'm trying to understand the question. Reading that,
Mhm.
thanks, Alec, for helping me with that. Uh, Difference between wallet security and a two-factor authentication uh, to access typical solutions. Well, there is quite some difference. I mean, there are good wallets which have the high degree of the security, and that's well known. I like Michal. Question is, what is a different approach, or should it be different, or you are asking which one is more secure, uh, and why you are afraid? Alec, we can let people to unmute themselves or not?
Unfortunately not.
Not.
Yes,
Then
we can wait for. Yep.
we can wait for Michal to clarify the question, because I mean, for me and for what I know and for what I'm aware, that's what the wallets nowadays, actually the good and trustworthy wallets, they implement more secure mechanisms like the simple two-factor authentication which you are using in Gmail and in bank. And uh, I mean, moving identity to the wallets we use, yeah, it will bring the access to the applications and traditional applications more secure. We can go to another question, and then I would be back if there would be clarification.
Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Yes, so the next question is for Odiv. He says when showing a passport in a shop, you can show only the page with data needed, so you manage your identity data manually.
Not always. Ask,
I think
well,
that
think
was
about
kind
the
of a
police
comment.
when you are in a car, when they ask you and you're trying to show them that through the glass. It's always the moment of the negotiation. And basically, giving your passport, you're also feeling vulnerable because, well, that's your main identity. I don't know about you, but I would prefer not to give the source of my identity to anyone. I'd like to share on the attestation. I don't want to show what I don't have to show. And it's also when you're saying that only the page which they need, there's also quite some of the data on the page. For example, if they want to check my name, that's okay. But at the same page, we have the birthday and we have the location where I was born. I don't think that it's that frequently necessary to demonstrate. You can separate that. Also depends on a
Mm.
country which issues the password because they group information. Well, I mean, I think you would agree with me that it's beyond your control. And having that in a self-sovereign identity wallet, you're basically just selecting which data to share, which attestations to share. If they ask about the age, you can show the age without the name at all. Next question, Alec.
I think I'm experiencing some lags, but I don't know on whose end is it. I hope everybody can see me and hear
Well, we can
me,
see you well
hopefully.
and you can hear you well. I don't know, is there any distortion? But the picture is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I hear you with delay. But yeah, so let's proceed to the next question from Gabor. Gabor says, is it possible to store data on chain encrypted and releasing it with a signature?
It's possible. That's arguable if it's the best approach, but that's possible. The problem is the cost of the storage and the cost of the operations, and also the speed. Because if you store the big documents and you need to transmit them over the network, there would be delays. And if you store that in decentralized form, there are enough now decentralized storages, reliable decentralized storages. But again, cost and time. So, well, I logically would prefer not to store the data on chain. It's also in terms of storing something on chain, that's why there's some information which I would prefer not to share with anyone. I will feel more secure. And the attestation that, like, I mean, somebody like, why this information relates to certain parties, then I'm ready to receive the attestations from them. But I do believe that I'm the better keeper of this data than the network itself. But yes, technically it's possible, and there are solutions which stores and I've been showing the specs for the data hubs, which are actually storing data on chain and storing data on a decentralized format or centralized format. It depends on how you would develop that. Uh, all this possible if it's necessary. That depends on design.
Mhm. I think the next two comments are in the same context. So, Odium says, yes, how do you provide hiding user data and allow users choose what to share? ZK Solutions, I hope ZK stands for zero knowledge.
Yes, it's
And
zero knowledge.
yeah,
Uh,
another interpretation, yeah, only the end part is different of Gabor's question. So, is it possible to store all private data on chain encrypted in a contract and releasing different part of it with a signature?
That's possible, but I would not recommend that to anyone. Storing private data on chain is a violation of all the private data management regulations. You cannot delete the private data from a chain. I like when like you can store anything. Like, I mean, technically, what you will send that will be stored. Like if you will choose the store, like, and then again, you can design a smart contract which will give the portions of the data out. It's all not a rocket science, but I would, if like, I would not recommend to anyone to store the private data on chain. That's basically the main issue stopping the mass adoption of blockchain for medical services. The high security personal data, which needs to be treated on a certain way, which blockchain cannot offer right now, or very complex and very expensive blockchain solutions which can do so. And the previous question was slightly different. It's about the portions of data. I recommend the person who is asking to check basically deed and verifiable claims spec. Uh, the specification contains the possibilities, and I've seen at least 3 realizations of that already. Basically, when you do have like the claim is shaped, like every characteristic separately, this is a separate claim, and so you can choose on a wallet which ones to demonstrate. User is choosing what to share, and that's granular enough. It depends of how would it like document schema is designed, but wisely designed one has all the characteristics separate, which means that you can share as much or as less as you want.
Okay, and I think that was the last question. And before we go further, I think I'm gonna ask one question to you, the last question for today. So, Sasha, imagine you have a superpower to fix one thing in the centralized identity sphere. What would that be?
Good thing. Never had a superpower, so now I'm thinking that's probably the best question of today. If I will have the like, if I will give something for the question, I will give it to you, Alec. Uh, what I will solve, I cannot say, but I wish I would be able to say more precisely. But when it speaks about a superpower, that means that I'm not thinking about the cost, right? It's like boom, and everything is done. Then probably like we will have the nice. I haven't seen much implementations with the zero knowledge done because it's complex. It's complex, and a lot of research work needs to be done. A lot of implementation. It's because of the cost, because of the cost of the zero knowledge implementations. If I can resolve that with just a wish, I probably will do that. And I probably will say that I'd like to see the implementation of the SSI protocol merged with the zero knowledge, with the proofs. That would be, I think, the next step. But for that, like, I mean, zero knowledge mass adoption is slower than SSI right now.
Hmm. Thank you so much. I think that was a very good reply. And before we end today's session, I'm going to ask everyone once again to visit our social media pages to check out the last call for speakers of our upcoming Blockchain Community Day conference, and to register if you are not planning to propose a talk. Just visit the links and register for our upcoming events. And I'm going to bring the link. Yeah, so it's now under the screen. So thank you so much everyone who came today, who visited our today's session, and thank you Sasha for such a great presentation. I think it's now the right time to conclude our today's webinar, and hope to see everyone soon. See you in a while.
Thank you for having me here. Bye bye.
Bye.